So I came to Taliban today to see and listen, but also to say that Germany recognizes its responsibility for contributing to global warming, for contributing to the destruction caused by the climate crisis, for waiting too long to act, for not listening for too long to the voices of the people and the communities that are hit the hardest by the climate crisis. I came to Taliban today to say, we hear you, the world hears you, and slowly, too slowly, the world has started to act. The world is waking up and it has started to listen, and that's because the people who suffer from the impacts from the climate crisis cannot be ignored or overheard anymore. The world cannot sleep anymore because there are too many and they are too loud. Because the sad reality is Taliban is not a single tragedy. Similar catastrophic events are happening all over the world and with ever greater frequency. I was in Bangladesh last year, where I met a woman who had to completely relocate her family and her home due to an intensive storm that had destroyed her village. And she had opened up a small business with a small grant, one of the millions that had gone to Dhaka. And she was able to feed her family and have a roof over her head. And I'll never forget that look of determination on her face, that she was going to provide for her family. And I was in the Sahel, and I met the women there who had also had to move, who were climate migrants because of the drought and the famine in Mali. And they had gone to Niger, and they had there started a small farm that they were providing not only for the climate migrants that had moved, but also the whole village that they had relocated to with climate resilient crops. It was incredibly impressive. So I think it's a tragedy in itself that so many people have had to lose their homes and their lives and their future before the world has really started to pay serious attention. I've been to all of the international climate meetings and the COPs from the very beginning, and I can tell you from the very beginning, the most vulnerable countries have argued and advocated for many, many years for more support and more protection from the climate crisis and more action to phase out fossil fuels and phase up renewable energy. And things have to change. They are changing slowly. And I think to help and to protect the most vulnerable, the world needs to do two things. First of all, it has to be more ambitious to bring down greenhouse gas emissions, to keep that 1.5 degree limit within sight to avoid even more devastating consequences. And I think it's just crucial to take these urgent measures to drastically reduce emissions, which are fueling this cycle of disaster and making things even worse. And this means drastically reducing the use of fossil fuels in all sectors to keep the 1.5 degree upper warming limit within reach. In fact, we need to have the global emissions in the next 7 years, because right now we're on a pathway to 2.5 to 2.7 degrees Celsius. And if you heard the Secretary General at the last COP, he said this is a highway to hell. That's our Secretary General of the United Nations. So therefore, at this year's COP, we need to close that gap. We have to decide on a transformational roadmap to close that gap between that 2.5 and 2.7 and 1.5 at the latest by 2030. And one key aspect of that roadmap should be a commitment for every country to be raising its ambitions, particularly the major economies, but also to agree on a global renewable energy goal, to triple renewable energy around the world and phase out fossil fuels, and to have the effective financing to do so, so that Taliban and villages here can also have solar to provide electricity and for your homes. And I think we need this because we know that every 1/10 of a degree matters, and at every 1/10 of a degree, less means less floods, less storms, less droughts, and also an alternative development model that can bring many benefits to people, a just development transition, as you were saying, Mr. President. It's very clear that wealthy countries have to take the lead, and Germany recognizes our own responsibility in doing that. That's why we have a goal to be greenhouse gas neutral in 2045 and a binding climate law to do that. to reduce our emissions by 65% below 1990 levels by 2030. And last year we accelerated our energy transformation to have a renewable energy goal of 80% by 2030. But we need all major emerging economies, starting with the developed countries, but all major economies in the G20 to do more to rapidly shift to a just energy transition to renewable energy and also to drive down deforestation to zero. Second, we have to have more solidarity with the countries and the communities that are already heavily impacted by the climate crisis. And that's why I had the honor of being able to work hard at the last COP being requested by the Egyptian presidency to work with the Chilean environment minister to get all nations to agree to create a suite of better funding arrangements for dealing with loss and damage on the ground, including a dedicated loss and damage fund. And the decision to create that new funding arrangement for loss and damage at COP27, it was a historic decision for the most vulnerable countries that have been advocating it for 30 years. And it was an overdue signal of solidarity and climate justice. This was a great priority for Germany and the European Union to ensure this historic decision to assist vulnerable developing countries. And now we have to make sure that this really helps reach the people who need it, and fast. If I heard anything today, we need to move faster. That people who lose their homes because of a storm or have to leave their village because of a flood, they don't have time to wait. So therefore, we're taking an active role in the Transitional Committee, which is setting up this fund, for the next COP. And maybe quickly, just three aspects that we're looking for there. First is that these new funding arrangements need to focus particularly on supporting the most vulnerable countries. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not. So we need to work to make sure that countries like the Philippines and the most vulnerable get that, who need it most urgently. Second, the funding arrangements and the funds need to be able to draw on a broad base of financial sources and contributions. So yes, Germany and developed countries need to contribute, but also all countries that are in a position to do so should contribute to the Loss and Damage Fund. And no country should be able to hide behind formalities and past decisions to avoid contributions. All countries who have the money and are big emitters should show solidarity and pay their fair share. We all need strong shoulders we need all of those shoulders to carry the weak and protect the most vulnerable. And third, we need to build a strong ecosystem of better funding for resilience around Loss and Damage Fund. The fund it's essential, but actually alone, it's not going to do everything and won't be enough. So we need to look at existing institutions and initiatives that can step up and support them in their engagement on loss and damage. Just listening about the resiliency work you're doing here, I think is a great example for that broad ecosystem that is needed. Existing institutions and initiatives, well, they need to step up their engagement on loss and damage. The multilateral development banks, the international financial institutions, the big climate funds have a key role to play, not the least in ensuring that everything from ports to agricultural projects to new urban centers are built or rebuilt with the realities of the world with the climate crisis in mind. Last year, the German government made the issue of climate-induced losses and damages a key aspect of our G7 presidency. And together with the Vulnerable 20, the V20, we agreed to create what we named the Global Shield against climate risks. The Global Shield officially was launched at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it contributes to this mosaic of the solutions we need in order to address loss and damage. But we're not only kind of advocating for more solidarity on the global stage, we very much, and this is why I'm so pleased to be in the Philippines, we want to intensify our bilateral cooperation with the Philippines. I came to the Philippines to listen, and also to discuss how we can collaborate more efficiently and better provide support so that it really benefits people. The Philippines and Germany have been partnering since a very early stage, early on, and in particular through the International Climate Initiative, to assist building resilience and to enhance and mainstream adaptation to climate change. And since the Philippines are also one of the 17 mega biodiversity countries on the globe, addressing the impacts of climate change here always includes a broad approach, addressing the triple crises: climate, biodiversity, and pollution. So our cooperation thus, it includes projects to promote ecosystem-based adaptation and climate-resilient urban planning, the development of climate information services and disaster risk assessment systems, as well as support for mainstreaming adaptation across national plans and processes. And I'm really glad that our bilateral cooperation is really gaining fresh momentum. I'm also very happy that we have a new bilateral project that's just about to start with a funding volume of 38.6 million euros. The project focuses on integration, because we have to think all of this together, on adaptation, mitigation, and biodiversity solutions in 3 landscapes in the Philippines, and through a whole society approach with NGOs and local communities. The project's piloting transition process to a climate-resilient, low-carbon, and biodiversity-friendly society. So tomorrow we're going to have our first bilateral climate consultation in Manila, and then we'll build on this cooperation and discuss how we can work even more closely in the future. Let me end that even though it is difficult in these times of climate crisis, on a more optimistic note. Because we need optimism and hope in times like these. Despite the horrors, despite the devastation and the losses, to keep on fighting against the climate crisis and for a more just world. And the climate crisis affects all of us, and no country can escape from its consequences. It knows no borders, and therefore we need cross-border cooperation and global solutions to contain it. And we're working here in the Philippines on that. And when I talk to people around the world, I have a tremendous privilege to travel and to meet people around the world. I'm optimistic that there are enough people out there who understand this, who get it. And not only that, but that there are millions of people every day who are taking action in their own lives, or they are advocating that governments and corporations take action now. And they don't see each other all around the world. Sometimes I think you can feel lonely maybe as a climate activist, but you're not alone. And these millions of people around the world, I think, are what is making me have hope in these days. And I think we also have a moment where for more opportunity for more partnerships and new collaborations. So I'm here to deepen our bilateral collaboration in the climate sphere and beyond, between our governments, but also our people. And we should look on the university level, where could we be working together? Looking on the local level, where can we be working together? Because when I talk to the people here in Tacloban today who went through so much and lost everything, I have to say it's left a bit of a scar on my heart. It breaks my heart. But then when I saw how they carried on, despite all of the difficulties, despite all of the challenges to rebuild and move their community into new homes, and how they live now, how they are forward-looking, how they are working on these solutions despite everything, was a tremendous inspiration for me. And it should be an inspiration for the whole world. So I'll certainly tell Tacloban's story when I'm traveling around the world and in Europe, of course, as well. So I'm very grateful that I was able to come here and speak to you today. We are connected in our fight for climate justice, and I look forward to our panel to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam State Secretary. And now we will listen to to the sectoral responses. We begin with Ms. Joanna Sustento Baksa, who, as many of us who come from Tacloban know, is Tacloban born and raised. She has a very powerful story to tell about Yolanda. But I wanted to also say that Joanna is a climate activist. She's a movement organizer and at the moment is part of the Roots Project of Greenpeace Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, Joanna Sustento Baksa.
Moping adlaw ka nga tanan. To our guests, good morning. Well, good noon. So I'm Joanna Sustento Baksa, and I work with Greenpeace. It is an independent environmental campaigning organization. As mentioned by Dean Pat, I'm also a climate justice activist, a wife, a soon-to-be mother, and a daughter of Tacloban. Today, allow me to speak as someone who's part of the climate justice movement, and like many of you who are here today, as a Super Typhoon Haiyan survivor. After all, Super Typhoon Haiyan is our own tragic story of loss and damage. Filipinos, especially Azorais, are no strangers to typhoons. It has been our way of life. Every year, since we were kids, classes would be suspended because of typhoons. My privileged self loved typhoons because it meant the whole family would be home. We'd eat, sleep, and make the most out of the cozy weather. Back then, I was ever so ignorant how it disproportionately impacted the rest of my community. However, all of that changed almost 10 years ago on November 8, 2013, when my family and I were in an epic battle amidst the wind, the rain, and the 15 feet high storm surge brought by Super Typhoon Haiyan. That day left me with no choice but to witness my father slip through my grasp as he was being swallowed by the deluge. It was the day I watched my mother die in my arms, and I was forced to make the most difficult decision of letting her go so I may live. In a span of 2 hours, just like the thousands of people in my community, I lost everything I've ever loved and known. Haiyan took away my parents, my eldest brother, my sister-in-law, and my 3-year-old nephew, leaving only me and my older brother as survivors. Loss and damage is not a future reality. It is already happening now. What is heartbreaking and profoundly unfair is that peoples and communities who suffer the most are the ones who contributed the least to the root of the problem. The poor, marginalized, and groups rendered vulnerable. I would like to emphasize that communities are not climate vulnerable per se, but communities are rendered vulnerable to climate impacts because of the world economic order, the kind of unfair, unjust, and colonial economic systems and systems of power that dominate the world, all of which have caused the climate crisis, and now resulting in loss and damage because communities were not given the fighting chance to adapt. Here in the Philippines, this is our reality. The climate crisis is as real as a father who has worked all his life to provide for his family, only to wake up one day and realize his livelihood has been torn apart. It is as real as a mother bearing the agony of looking for her missing husband all day and sleeping beside the dead bodies of her children at night. It is as real as a child who no longer dreams for his future because all of his focus is directed towards his daily survival. The climate crisis is as real as the millions of families who lost their homes and livelihood, who, to date, continue to bear the consequences of a severely disrupted climate system and yet to recover from Haiyan, as many other extreme climate events have followed it year after year. We welcome the goodwill brought here by State Secretary Jennifer Morgan and her lifelong work to help political ambition gives good inspiration. But the climate crisis requires more political will from political masters. International climate negotiations have been marred by attempts to trade mitigation against loss and damage. But nature does not negotiate, and nature does not compromise. Politicians continue to get away with compromises. In the meantime, global South countries rendered most vulnerable, like the Philippines, continue to pay the ultimate price for their inaction. While it is likely reassuring that a loss and damage fund was established at COP27 last year, it will be recalled that the conference started with all developed countries saying a fund would be impossible. But repeated pressure forced them to shift. The decision to establish a loss and damage fund at COP27 is a symbol of what's possible when developing countries, communities, civil society, and climate activists stand firm in demanding climate justice. It should also be deeply emphasized that the loss and damage fund remains empty and is yet to be resourced. Obviously, the climate crisis is one of the biggest injustices in human history. Those who contributed the most to this problem remain accountable and refuse to pay for much of the solutions for climate change. And they refuse to be held accountable for loss and damage. The nations, as well as the powerful and wealthy corporations they harbor, that have benefited the most over the past century should pay for loss and damage. The fossil fuel industry should pay for loss and damage. It is also a problem when so-called climate leaders, such as our European partners, continue to extract and burn coal for their energy, and then we talk about energy transition for developing countries. The growing climate justice movement around the world will not forgive this failure. They will not forgive the co-option and corporate capture evident at every juncture of global politics. The struggle will continue and the guilty held accountable through growing climate litigation, growing consumer action, and growing direct action to confront new fossil fuel developments. Business and systems, as usual, must be changed. As we have painfully realized here in Tacloban, loss and damage is a matter of life and death. All of us, regardless of our nationality, of our culture, desire a safe world. At the end of the day, we just want to protect the people we love. In November 2022, 9 years after I lost my family to Hayan, I found out I was pregnant with my first child. Since then, my personal fight for climate justice had a whole new meaning. No longer am I only fighting for what I have lost and for what our communities suffered 10 years ago. I am now fighting to protect the future of my own flesh and blood, and that to me is a revolution. It is our hope that our dialogue today continues to strengthen our collective resolve to end the climate crisis, and the rich, powerful nations should show genuine leadership. Hope is what we feel every time we tell our stories and when we are heard. Hope is what we feel when people stand up to hold those who destroy our future accountable. It may very well be hope is what we see when diplomacy truly delivers what the world needs to avert the climate crisis. It has been 10 years since Super Typhoon Haiyan. Let's hope we don't wait for another lost decade on climate justice. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Joanna. Our next response will come from the Honorable Melchor Margal, who is the former mayor of the municipality of Salcedo, Eastern Samar, and who is now a board member representing the 2nd District, as well as the chairperson of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Change Adaptation of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan of Eastern Samar. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Melchor Margal.
Thank you, Dean. Distinguished guests, Jennifer Morgan, the Secretary, the State Secretary, the delegation from the University of the Philippines headed by President Jimenez, the stakeholders who are present today, civil societies organizations, representatives from the different national agencies, as well as the the non-government, as well as international organizations who are good now. My task is to react on what was I heard during the previous speeches of the speakers. And first of all, I would like to share to you also my experience. The Typhoon Yolanda was my baptism of fire during my first term as municipal mayor. I am a lawyer, and before I became a mayor, I was working with the National Bureau of Investigation. And disaster risk reduction and management, as well as climate change adaptation, for me is, I must accept that I really don't know what is DRR, I really don't know what is climate change adaptation. But fortunately for me, I have specifically Plan Philippines, who are actually there in my municipality during my first term, and they were the one who were guiding me what to do during the Typhoon Yolanda. So it is the same traumatic experience that I experienced with my co-reactor, my previous co-reactor, and still the devastation. We have one picture. The municipality of Salcedo is only 17 kilometers away from Giwan, the first landfall of Typhoon Haiyan. And throughout the highway or Yolanda affected highway, we all have the same pictures actually. And 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, it still haunt us because of that devastation. Yes, I represent from the government sector, specifically from the local government units. They were saying that climate change is a global issue that needs a local action. And that would mean the local government units. But the definition of the local government units does not only refer to the people that are doing or delivering the basic services to the people, but also the whole community. For me, that is the definition of the local government unit. Meaning to say, it's not only the responsibility of the local government units, but it is the responsibility of all its citizens. But they can only appreciate their responsibility if they are given the correct, exact amount of information on what issues they are trying to address. And as our speaker said, the number one issues right now when it comes to intergenerational responsibility, for example, is about climate change. Okay? For me, it is real. And I personally witnessed this during my stay in the municipality of Salcedo. We stayed along the coast, along the Lippy Gulf area in the municipality of Salcedo. And there is really an observable, not significant, there is an observable increase of the level rise in our house along the coast. Okay? But please don't scold me. I am now living in the mountains because I am a good citizen, because I am within the no-build zone area. So I transferred to the mountains. Ma'am Jennifer Morgan actually is talking about injustice. And that is really very true. The Philippines, as what Dean Jimenez told us, ranked first in the World Risk Index among the 193 or 196 countries in the world. So we are the first. And the Philippines, as you can see, is an archipelagic. We are living not on soil, but we are living on seas or water, as what one of the professors in Ateneo saying. So when it comes to disaster extremes or climate change issues, really, the Philippines is really very, very vulnerable. So what does the government is doing when it comes to this issue? Well, based on my experience, there is less discussion that is going on at the local level. It's good for the higher ups that they keep on having these discussions, but it is not being translated or it's not being mainstreamed to the local level. That's why with my engagement with my partners, usually I told them, let's have this kind of discussion at the senior high schools, elementary schools, and even the communities at the barangay level, so that they appreciate that it really there is a problem regarding climate change. And speaking of injustice, really, let's say for example, in Eastern Samar, we are one of the poorest provinces in the whole Philippines. In fact, we rank first in the region. Although because of our initiatives, of the provincial initiatives, there is this 11% drop of poverty incidents, but still, we are the poorest province in the region 8 and maybe the third or the fourth province that is poorest in the whole Philippines. Okay, so what I'm saying is that because of climate change, our budget in the NATA, the national allocation to the local government units are being siphoned because almost all of our projects has to be allocated for climate change adaptations. So flood controls, improvement of our drainage, improvement of our waterways, as well as seawalls. And it tells a lot of millions or even billions of pesos if we quantify it. If you can see in the General Appropriations Act and even in the provincial budget or even in the municipal budget, it really siphons our money and we use that to fund climate change adaptation. And yet, we are the least contributor of climate related concerns, and yet it eats our money. It makes us more vulnerable. There is really injustice that is going on, and right now we are planning in partnership with Greenpeace that somebody has to be accountable to that. It's really very encouraging, and I was motivated when I went to the office of Greenpeace when they briefed me regarding the report of the Commission on Human Rights regarding the investigation that was conducted regarding climate violations. And there was really evidence. That there are violations of human rights that are climate related, and we have to do something about it, and somebody has to stand about it. And the problem is that our Commission on Human Rights has no prosecutorial power. But that's a good start. In fact, one of the initiatives that my office is doing right now is to have this kind of inquiry before at the provincial level on what or how does the provincial local government is doing when it comes to climate change issues or concerns or violations of climate change. Okay, so that's about budget, and that's about injustice. That's making us more vulnerable, and di kita makausad because of this. And yes, also Ma'am Jennifer Morgan talks about the responsibility of nations. Okay, because the Philippines is a third world country, there has to be this rich country should be accountable. Okay, should be accountable because they are the they are emitting huge amount of carbon polluting agents in our atmosphere. And when we talk about loss and damage, I think we can avail of their support actually. The good thing right now through the initiative, I think of Greenpeace and other organizations, there is this proposed Klima bill. That is pending before Congress right now that seeks a legal remedy for constituents if they find that a human rights was violated because of climate-related issues or concerns. They call it as Klima bill. And we're hoping from our congressmen or senators to support this bill because this will be a first law that will make accountable all those carbon producer corporations. Okay? Then, important is research and development. In the Philippines, and based on my experience, while I was still the mayor and now that I am a board member, there is less research regarding climate change impacts, and that we can use this in all our policy development. This is what was emphasized by the minister in his opening remarks, that really there is this important role of academia in helping the local government units in coming up with researches that would address or that caters the data regarding climate change impact in the Philippines, so that we can use it as evidence in our policy development. And also renewable energy. I think it's about time that the Philippines should engage on renewable energy. This is also mentioned by co-reactor. And there are initiatives of the national organizations or international organizations regarding technologies. Like in San Pedro, we have a consortium of international organizations, the Building Resilient, Adaptive, and Disaster Relief communities, and it's really a good example of a technology where we can mitigate the impact or the damage of disasters or as well as climate change. So I know that they are available, but still there is a need of collaboration regarding this, kasi there are it violates some existing policies that we have right now. Let's say, for example, if our BBD says we have to give money to the vulnerable communities 3 days before landfall, and yet the COA says, no, you cannot do that because you can only use the RR fund upon landfall or after the declaration of a state of calamity. So I think that's it. And what I'm saying is the whole of government approach. It's not only the responsibility of the government, but also the responsibility of the civil society organizations and the people as well. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir. And our third reactor, or the third response, is from Dakila Kim Yi, who is an assistant professor in sociology of the Division of Social Sciences of UP Tacloban. He has done a number of studies on this theme. Ladies and gentlemen, Dax.
To our distinguished guest, Ma'am Jennifer Morgan, good morning, and to our distinguished guest from the University of the Philippines, Chief President Jimenez, and to our local chief executives who are here, and to our representatives from NGOs and civil society organizations who are here. Thank you very much. So I will try to make this very concise because it's already lunch, no? But I'm speaking as a member of the academe, and we want to emphasize what could be done, no? Or what are the tasks moving forward in terms of trying to contribute to climate action. And of course, the first is really to to try to deepen the engagement with the state, with Philippine local government units, and if kaya, the national government. Of course, from a rights framework, the state is the duty bearer, and of course, local chief executives have the principal position in local governance, and the academe can help provide the necessary information. I think in the aspect of research, there is no problem with academics doing research. They are good with it, but the problem is always with scale, or trying to expand the influence of research findings, outputs. And so if we will be able to try to engage more with local government units in the various cycle of policy development, not just research dissemination, but if we can find a way to enter the policy process, that would be a very good initiative. Second, of course, is for us to be able to deepen more our engagement with NGOs and social movements in actual research related to climate change. One of the biggest contributions of NGOs and civil society organizations is in terms of norm diffusion. So policy norms need to be diffused or translated into local context, local environments, and as mentioned by our co-reactors, Honorable Mergal, Joanna, for example, in the aspect of renewable energy, this is not a policy that is easy to be implemented, and we are grateful for the role of NGOs and civil society organizations who are pushing the issue of renewable energy into the policy agenda. It's a long and arduous process, and I think that is where we can contribute more to find out how to make it more efficient, to translate these norms into usable frameworks in our local environments. And of course, lastly is to try to deepen the co-production of knowledge in terms of disaster risk reduction. Sometimes academia is criticized for its monopolization of knowledge, and that criticism is correct in some ways. And so if we can find ways to deepen our engagement with local communities, to learn more about their experiences of typhoons, how they cope, how they predict these types of events from happening, then we can democratize knowledge production and try to make more a just framework for climate action. So I guess that would be all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dax. We are running over time, but since you have waited so patiently, this is what I propose. 5 minutes for people to say what they want to say. There will be no time for a Q&A. So if you can just approach the mic, introduce yourself and the organization you represent, state your question or state your comment. It will all be taken under advisement as it were. And then we will have the closing remarks from the ambassador. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Madam State Secretary, Madam Ambassador, Mr. President, Mayor Mati, Mayor Alfred. I'm Mike Tyson, a public servant, a proud graduate of UP Tacloban. I will just give our speaker to have a clear picture of Region 8. I'm now in the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. In the Region 8, we are #1 in all over the country, which has no comprehensive land use program. 20 LGUs have no CLUP. 32 LGUs needs updating of their comprehensive land use program, which means their CLUP has been formulated before 1990. So you have mentioned some sort of financial assistance. Most of our LGUs are 4th class or 5th class municipality. To have a comprehensive land use plan, it entails around 2 million pesos. So this is a big chunk of the budget of the LGUs are, deprived. And one of the basic components is the Comprehensive Disaster Risk Assessment, or the CIDRA. One of the mainstream topic is climate change. But for CIDRA alone, they would need around a minimum amount of 200,000 pesos for training, aside from the info gathering. So maybe your group can look into this and help us, our LGUs, in their comprehensive land use plan assistance. Because even though how many talks we would sponsor, if we would not bring this to the ground, to the LGUs, wherein they will be taught of the impact of climate change, the impact of the disaster that would affect because of climate change. We would be having a hard time to let the people on the ground understand. And also, if you have a good land use plan, the LGU would be able to wisely allocate their agricultural land, their residential land. They could not just, if an investor comes in, we want to build an industry. Yes, as we were taught in economics, there's an economic gain, but there is a greater economic loss, damage done to the environment. So with this, I congratulate our board member. He has a CLUP and he's compliant. So I hope your group would help us, because the Philippines is a poor country. Even our department, I have only 3 personnel going around the region to lecture on comprehensive land use plan. So with our limited budget and limited manpower, who are 30%, 40%, I'm proud to say, graduate, so BUP Tacloban. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. He is the Regional Director of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, Region 8. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Director Tariq Leon of the Office of Civil Defense and the Chairperson of the Regional Disaster Risk Reduction Council for Region 8. I would just like to emphasize that there is the Local Risk Reduction Management Fund allocated for each municipality, and it is supposed to be 5% of their ERA. And out of that 5%, 70 is supposed to be allocated for prevention and mitigation, while 30% is for quick reaction fund in reaction to any disaster. The problem we have when reviewing the LDRMF is that the utilization rate is on average 50%. So there is a gap between the availability of funds and the utilization rate. My counterpart before me has stated with regards to this comprehensive land use plan, which is part of the requirement now of Gawad Kalasag, which is the assessment tool for assessing the municipality in their preparation. And also, we have a yearly review of the local risk reduction management plan of each LGU. This is being conducted yearly, and one of the improvements in the past years is the requirement of Gawad Kalasag as part of the requirement for the municipalities to avail of the SILGC already. So that's our problem. It's more on the utilization rates of the LDRMF funds. And of course, yeah, the board member raised a valid concern because there is different interpretation between COA, between COA municipalities. And with the aid of Congress, we are looking forward to harmonize that, because what is applicable in one municipality for prevention mitigation may not be applicable to the next municipality. Other COAs naman are not informed that right now the QRF has already been updated so that you could already use it for pre-positioning. So as stated by the board member, kinabawalan sila. But that, in the current GARA, that is already changed. No? So you could use QRF for prevention and preparedness measures. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Regional Director for the Calayon of Office of Civil Defense Region 8. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, guests. I am Ninette from a local NGO, the latest Center for Development. We were Yolanda survivors as well. So I would just like to take this rare opportunity to be able to thank the German people, the German taxpayers, because through Plan Germany, BMZ and the German Federal Foreign Office, you supported our program on climate change adaptation and building climate resiliency in southern Leyte, in 2 municipalities from 2013 until 2016. It was a 3.5-year program. And fast forward, 5 years after that, we were hit hard by Typhoon Rai, local name Typhoon Odette, in December 16, 2021. It was almost as strong as Typhoon Haiyan, but not as strong. And many villages, communities were affected. So we did a damage survey after 48 hours, and we were so happy, which I would like to share to the German people, that because of the mangrove forest we planted in 2012 through BMZ and Plan Germany, we saved 2,300 lives, 350 families in 4 barangays in Silago town in southern Leyte. So this is a success story. We didn't realize that we could really save lives in the following years after Typhoon Haiyan. So we always say that building resiliency through natural methods is always the best. And capacitating communities with knowledge and skills on disaster preparedness to mitigate the impact of any disaster is also a good investment. As I always say, when a disaster hits, it's not going to be us, the NGOs, who will be first to help. It's not even going to be the government who will be first. It's going to be your neighbor. So we have to invest in community capacities on DRR. So thank you very much again to the German taxpayers and the German people, Madam Ambassador, Ms. Morgan, and also I would like to thank Joanna and the other panels, because you, Joanna, encapsulated the experience of Typhoon Haiyan, we as survivors, and you really articulated what our advocacy should be and what we would be standing up now, even if we have to go against the powers that are in the whole world, and stand up for the future generation.
Thank you.
Salamat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for just one more. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Chen Pagulayan from Oxfam, Pilipinas, and I'm the Advocacy Officer for Climate and Just Energy Transition. I'd like to thank the German government for taking time going here and discussing with our stakeholders in Tacloban. But I'd like to, as chair of G7, it was recently pronounced, some developments on energy transition, but at the same time, we also want to express our concern over the expansion of fossil gas in Southeast Asia, which is now being a hot topic, being part of the energy transition. We're talking about fossil gas, which are fairly counterproductive for the climate movement, for the climate justice movement we're doing. And of course, as part of Oxfam's advocacy in terms of climate finance, we saw in our recent research about the climate finance flows that's going into Asia, particularly in the Philippines, and I hope that we look into it now, because most of it are loans, debts, and we don't want to be flooded, or we don't want to get drowned with climate debts in the future. We want climate resilience, we want climate justice, so we look into it, and we push, we advocate that all our initiatives, all our climate finances be grants-based and needs-based by the communities. And that in the essence of intergenerational solidarity as well. We hope that we don't forget the youth movement, the young people who are advocating and our future is at stake when we call on climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that's all we have time for. Those were excellent points. There will be, okay, just one more. I think Mayor Martin would like to say something. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm Mayor Martin Pitilla of Palo Leyte, and I was there before, during, and after Yolanda, and my town was greatly damaged, not underestimating it. So I just want to share about one thing. During the whole time, right after, during the whole time, I was there in my municipal building manning my command post for the disaster risk reduction office. And I saw the people. I saw people coming in, children, old, men, women, they come to the municipality for whatever reason. And so I even had movies shown in the early evenings to take away your minds from what happened. So, I just want to share one little thing that would greatly affect resilience. From experience, I know that. One of us externals, more than just the physical, I think we should...
Naka-feed sige. Okay, dito na tayo, ma'am. Ayan. Just look at me lang, JP, oh. So, actually, it's more of a summary lang of what you, I listened to what you said kanina. Siguro, ma'am, para lang maintindihan din ng public, no? Nag-ano kayo before ng, anong year yung inano yung mangrove? What year?
That was 2013. 2013, yes.
Okay, so you said kanina na because of those mangroves, it saved lives. Anong bagyo to, pinag-usapan natin, and paano siya nakaligtas ng buhay?
Yeah. So, as I said, I just wanted to thank the German people, the German taxpayers, kasi they supported a 3.5-year program that we did in Southern Leyte, in 2 towns, Silago and St. Bernard. The program was about climate adaptation, encouraging resiliency, teaching the communities resiliency. So, the main core of the program was we planted 7 hectares of mangroves and 300 hectares of upland trees. Yeah, so that was in 2013. We engaged the communities, we taught them DRR to mitigate the impact or lessen the impact of disasters kasi these are poor communities. Now, fast forward, after 5 years, we were hard hit in Leyte by Typhoon Odette, Typhoon Rai International name, December 16, 2021. So me and my team, we went to Southern Leyte because that was the hardest hit province in Eastern Visayas. And we found out the people, our beneficiaries, project beneficiaries, told us that, Ate Minette, the mangroves we planted through your project saved many lives. So we estimated around 2,300 individuals, more than 300 families in 4 barangays, 4 communities. Kasi the mangroves have natural barrier to the huge waves. And Silago Municipality in Southern Leyte is facing the Pacific Ocean. So they're often hit. But Typhoon Odette was so strong. So it really saved, compared to the other barangays in the same municipalities who did not have mangroves kasi they were not part of our program, many houses were damaged, totally damaged. Some people went missing. So I would always say that, it really proved that natural resiliency is the best compared to infrastructure. We always have to build natural resilience through mangrove planting, trees, and knowledge and skills of the people.
It basically prevented storm surge, no?
It basically prevented storm surge, and we didn't even realize it until we went and did damage needs capacities assessment 48 hours or 2 days after Typhoon Odette. That when we reached those communities, because we were worried about the effect, because we knew Southern Leyte was hardest hit in Region 8 in our region.
And that was because of the mangroves.
And that was because of the mangroves. So of course, we were so happy, and we wanted to share to our co-NGOs, to the people in general, that let's invest in natural resilience.
What's your full name again, ma'am? And where, ano po yung name ng NGO?
Yes, my full name is Minette Agisanda Jerusalem. I am the current executive director of the Leyte Center for Development, LCDE. We're a local NGO operating here in Samar, Leyte, but we're also a part of a national network called Citizens Disaster Response Network, doing also what we do, helping disaster survivors with mitigation, with knowledge and skills on disaster preparedness.
Thank you, Ma'am Lynette, for sharing your story. May pictures ba yan? Uy, may pictures ba yan? Sa cellphone ba yan? Sa cellphone.
Bigay na rin sa gawin. Ako, I cannot see. My eyeglasses. Hindi pa nakakasama.